Okay. So let's see, it is right at 11 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm really excited for this webinar, Sparrows. As maybe it's the same for many of you, and why you're here, have always been a challenging group of birds for me, so I was really excited to dive in and learn more about these really important birds. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are so glad that you're here to learn more about sparrows. So my name is Sarah, and I will be your presenter today. Like I mentioned, we're going to be learning all about sparrows during this webinar. So you might know them as LBBs or LBJs, which are little brown birds or little brown jobs, is how I learned it back in college, because that's kind of what they look like. You see them out in the field and you're like, oh gosh, it was a brown streaky bird. I'm not sure what it was. But my hope is that by the end of today, you will be much more confident in your ability to tell these birds apart and have some confidence in continuing to learn how to do that. We are recording this webinar, so don't worry about scrambling to take notes. It will also be up on our YouTube channel later today or in the next couple of days, and we'll send out a PDF of the slides so you have those to study. Also, if you haven't already done so, and if you have one, grab your favorite field guide or open your favorite birding app, because those will be really helpful. It's really helpful to kind of follow along in those as we're going through those birds today, so you have the tool that you'll be using as you're out in the field identifying birds. So first things first, just a little housekeeping. We're all pretty much Zoom experts by now, but just in case, here's a little tutorial. So again, we want to make sure that everyone is muted and your video is off, just to make sure that our technology runs smoothly. So in that green circle on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the microphone and the video. Just make sure there's a red line through both of those. We will be communicating using the chat function. So that green circle in the middle, you can click on that box and you'll be able to type in your questions. Also, make sure that you are directing them towards everyone. So that right-hand circle says everyone. You can privately message, but if you have a question, chances are someone else has the same question. So if you just make sure that you are messaging to everyone, we'll all know what questions you have. So I went to full screen. Yours probably did as well. And in order for you to see all of the slides, like the full picture of the slides and the chat box at once, you can click exit full screen and then click on the chat box, and that should dock the chat window right next to the slides. So like I said, my name is Sarah Doxson. I am one of the environmental educators at Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, and joining me today behind the scenes is Miss Stacy Monahan, our Camp and Family Programs Coordinator. And if you're watching us on Facebook, Kelsey Mazer is our moderator for Facebook, our Programs and Volunteer Coordinator. And today, if you ask a bird nerd what their favorite bird is, they will not be able to tell you because it changes every day. So today, my favorite bird is this little white-throated sparrow that we see up top, and Stacy's is the spotted toady. Beautiful. And a little bit about Bird Conservancy, if this is your first time joining us in a program. We are a nonprofit conservation organization dedicated to the conservation of birds. So it's our mission to conserve birds and their habitats. And we do that through this multifaceted approach. So we really have a firm belief that you can't come at conservation from just one angle. It's much more effective if you come at it from all different sides. So to do that, we operate in 3 different teams. We have our science team. They are the ones out in the field doing that boots on the ground research, monitoring bird populations, doing bird banding, which you can see in that top picture. and just really keeping a finger on the pulse of how birds are doing. We also have our stewardship team. So they are working with private landowners like farmers and ranchers, and they are helping them to implement conservation practices on their land that not only are going to be beneficial for birds and other wildlife, but also for their ranching or farming business as well. And then last but not least, you have us, the education team, and it's our job to help people learn about birds, learn how amazing they are, and what we can do to help them out as well. So now that you know a little bit more about us, we would love to get to know you. So if you don't mind sharing in the chat box, if you haven't done so already, where you're watching from today, how many people are watching with you, and what is your favorite bird today? And this information just helps us to know who we're interacting with. A lot of our funding also comes from how many people and where they're from that we get to interact with. So that helps us out a lot. Awesome. Thank you everyone for typing those in. New Jersey, very cool. North Carolina, wow. We have some out-of-staters. That's always really exciting when we get people from out of state and even out of country. Bird Conservancy, again, if you are new to these webinars, I forgot to mention, so we are Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. We are headquartered here in Brighton, Colorado, but we do work all throughout the Rocky Mountain region, from Montana all the way down into Mexico as well. All right, thank you everyone for letting us know where you're watching from and how many people. So in today's webinar, we are going to dive into the sparrow family. We'll learn to identify several species. We'll kind of explore their behavior. So that can be really helpful when we're identifying birds and maybe you can't get a good look at their field marks. Paying attention to the behavior can be really helpful in identifying as well. And we'll also discover some of the reasons for the decline that we're seeing among these grassland birds. So first of all, we're gonna throw it back to our high school biology days. It might be further away for some of us than others, but you might recognize this taxonomic rank. So it's kind of how we group animals and other things like that into groups and figure out how they're related and how that kind of tree of life looks. So there's this mnemonic device, King Philip came over for great soup. Kids these days, I've heard, are learning kids prefer candy over fried green spinach. So that's to help us remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So when we're dealing with birds, they are in class Aves. The birds we're looking at today, the sparrows, are in the order Passeriformes, and they're in the, so Passeriformes are perching birds, or some people refer to them as songbirds, and then the family, the New World sparrows we're talking about today, are in Passerellidae. Now, I got a little bit confused when I started researching this because in my field guide, it actually classifies them in the family Emberizidae. And that's a fairly recent change. So if it says that in your field guide, it doesn't mean that they printed it wrong. It just means that it's a bit out of date. No worries though, birds their classifications are changing all the time. So it just requires a little bit of homework to figure out where they currently go. So the New World sparrows are currently in family Passerellidae. And weirdly enough, this doesn't just include what you would normally think of as a sparrow. It also includes towhees and juncos. We won't focus on those today. We're just going to focus kind of on classic sparrows because that's already a lot to cover. But maybe down the road, we'll do a sparrows part 2. Okay, so characteristics. What makes a sparrow a sparrow? How do we know that it's a sparrow, a bird we're looking at as a sparrow and not another bird? So go ahead and type in the chat box. What do you think? When you think of a sparrow, what characteristics stand out to you? and I'll give us a few seconds to type in the chat box. Nice. All right, so similar coloring, small beaks, they eat everything. Very nice. Little brown birds, absolutely. So sparrows generally have this thick conical beak, and they are primarily seed eaters. So that cone-shaped beak is really, really well adapted to cracking open nuts and seeds. They will also eat insects as well, especially when they have chicks to raise that really need that protein to grow big and strong. They will eat insects as well. They are generally quite streaky with various patterns and variations of blacks and browns and buffy colors. As far as behavior, they usually hop low in shrubs and bushes. They also can be found on the ground, scratching at the ground, finding insects and seeds that might have fallen down there. And usually they're pretty social, and they can be found in flocks. And a lot of times, if you see a flock, especially in the winter time, and you look really closely, you'll probably notice that they're in mixed species flocks, which is pretty interesting. And that gives you a really great opportunity to work on your ID skills as well, because you have multiple species right next to one another, so you can really see those differences. There are over 40 species of sparrows across North America. We certainly don't have time to go over all of them today, but as I mentioned, I really hope that as we go through IDing some of these birds today, it'll really give you a feel for how to look for the subtleties. Even though a lot of them at first glance do look very, very similar, once you start figuring out what to look for, it can be really, really helpful and become much easier to identify these sparrows when you know those little subtleties. Oh, and I just saw a question and we're going to answer it. How do they, or why do they distinguish new and old world sparrows? So the house sparrow that I am sure most of you are familiar with are actually part of a different family. So the New World sparrows, Passerellidae, which we'll be focusing on today, is a different family than the house sparrow. They belong to Passeridae, which sounds very familiar, can be a little confusing. But Old World sparrows refer to the sparrows that are native to Europe. The New World sparrows are native to North America. And the reason that they distinguish them is even though they look similar, their DNA and how they sequence their genomes is quite different, which is very strange. And again, we don't have time to go into the science of that. That would be a cool thing to cover as well. But just know that even though they look similar, they are different genetically. House sparrows were introduced to the US first in New York in 1851, and they very, very quickly spread across the whole US, and they can be found everywhere, especially in urban environments. We also refer to them as French fry birds. You can also often see them in parking lots, hopping around, stealing French fries and other tasty treats that some of us might have dropped. Another interesting difference is that in house sparrows, the females and the males look different. In many of the species we'll look at today, the males and the females look the same. So in our slide here, the top one is the female and the bottom is the male house sparrow. So the female, pretty streaky, she has pretty thick streaks on her back. Some sparrows have more finer streaking. And then she has this really thick kind of buffy eye line that goes behind her eye. And then of course the males have this characteristic black bib on their chest and throat and a chestnut colored head. All right, so those are house sparrows. We're probably all familiar with those. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of some of these other sparrows that maybe we aren't familiar with. So the first one we'll look at is the American tree sparrow. So these birds, if you live in Colorado, and in fact, throughout most of the US, they are winter visitors. So they will visit us during the winter, which is pretty exciting to still be able to see a sparrow in the winter and something that looks as beautiful as this. So some of their field marks, their characteristics are this rusty cap rusty colored cap on top of their head. And then they have an eye line that matches that color. They have a black spot right in the middle of their chest. And then if you look at its bill, it's what we call bicolored. So it is black on top and yellow on the bottom, which is pretty interesting. So that's our tree sparrow. Next, we have our Vesper Sparrow. So this is a pretty common grassland bird. I think they're really, really beautiful, just lots of different fine streaking. But again, lots of sparrows are streaked. So let's focus on a couple of other outstanding field marks. If you take a look at the eye, you'll notice an eye ring, a white eye ring that surrounds it. And then they have what we call a malar stripe, which kind of looks like a mustache. So you notice it's kind of a thick white line that goes down from its beak, kind of across its cheek there. They do have this rusty patch on the bottom picture. You can see that, this little rusty patch on their shoulder, but a lot of times it's kind of difficult to see. You notice in the top picture, you can't even see it there, but that is a field mark if you can see it. And then as they're flying away, they have white outer tail feathers, which not a lot of sparrows have. So that can be another quick field mark that you can see if they're in flight. And we can find these little birds during migration and breeding. So pretty much during the spring, summer, and fall in Colorado. And one of our coworkers, Colin, who did our banding webinar a few weeks ago, his little pup is named Vesper, after this lovely little bird. Next, we have a Savannah Sparrow. So these birds, they have a pretty small bill. So if we go back here, let's look at our tree sparrow. Their bill is pretty thick. It's a little bit bigger. And then if we flip back, our Savannah Sparrow kind of has a little bit more dainty of a bill. They also have fairly short tails. So that's another thing that varies between sparrows that can be helpful, is the length of their tail. So they have short tail, they have a pretty heavily streaked breast, and then probably the most defining characteristic is this yellow patch. And in this area of the bird, that area between their beak and their eye is called the lore, L-O-R-E. So they have a yellow wash on their lore. And let's see, I just saw someone ask, will we get notes? Yes, absolutely. This is a lot to cover. So we will send out a PDF of the slides, and we're recording it, and it will be on YouTube. So you can go back and watch to get a refresher. Okay, so there is our beautiful Savannah Sparrow. Next, we have a Brewer Sparrow. So if you notice, this guy has a really long tail. So again, let's flip back. There's our Savannah Sparrow with a pretty short tail, and then the Brewer Sparrow has that really long tail. These birds are fairly unmarked, right? There's not a whole lot that stands out on this bird. If you look closely at their crown, it is pretty finely streaked. And then they do kind of have that malar or mustache stripe and a line that goes over their eye that are kind of faint or almost like a dirty brown color. And then their habitat differs as well. So these birds are what we call sagebrush obligate. So they really depend on sagebrush habitat. So that's mostly where you'll see these birds. Next is our chipping sparrow. I think these birds look so cool. So they have this rusty cap, and they have a black eye line. So if you remember back to our American tree sparrow, they also have a rusty cap and an eye line, but their eye line is also that kind of rust color. So that's one difference between the chipping and the tree sparrow. And also the chipping, their bill is all black. The tree sparrow was, remember, that bicolored black and yellow. The bird that you see on the bottom is them in non-breeding plumage. So again, with most sparrows, The males and the females look the same, whether it's breeding season or not breeding season. So these two birds, we don't know if they're males or females. We just know that the top one is during breeding season, so during the summer, and the bottom one is during non-breeding season. So that might be what they look like during the winter months. They're a little more, their coloration is a little more toned down. And in Colorado, you can find these during their migration and breeding, so spring, summer, and fall. All right, so we've gotten our feet a little bit wet. We've gone through a few sparrows. We're going to have our first learning celebration, which is the fun name we give to quizzes. So just keep in mind, especially if this is new to you, just do the best you can and have fun. I will say, if you do know right away, please wait a few seconds to type in your answer, just to give others a little bit of time to think and look through their field guides. And that being said, if you don't want it spoiled for you right away, just go ahead and hide your chat box or just ignore it so that to give yourself a chance to look it up. Like I said, even if you have no idea, that's okay. Go ahead and guess, because if you're guessing, you're thinking, and that means you're learning. So get out your field guides or your apps, or just go with your gut, and good luck. So I'll put up these pictures and give everyone a few minutes or a few seconds to, there we go, to answer what birds you think they are. So just go ahead and type in the chat box, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And they will be sparrows that we just went over. I can hear the gears turning. Everyone's really trying to figure out these field marks. All right. Now some answers are coming in. Very nice. Yikes. I know. And that's the thing to remember too, is to definitely give yourself grace when you're learning birds, especially a family like sparrows that are pretty tricky. Nice. So most people are getting at least number 1. All right, so here we go, the big reveal. So number 1 is the American tree sparrow. So again, that central spot on its chest and that rusty cap, those are its really defining field marks. Number 2 was the Brewer sparrow. So again, just kind of a plain unmarked bird, but they do have that kind of dirty brown malar or mustache stripe. Number 3 was the house sparrow, the female house sparrow. Number 4 is the Vesper Sparrow with that beautiful clean white eyeline and malar or mustache stripe. Number 5 is the chipping sparrow with the rusty cap and black eyeline. And number 6, the Savannah Sparrow with that beautiful yellow wash on its lower, or the area between its beak and eye. Very nice job. I am super impressed by everyone's answers. Bravo. Okay, so we'll go through a few more species and have another learning celebration in just a few slides. Nice job, everyone. Okay, next we have our song sparrow. These are their song, as you can guess, is really beautiful and really quite distinct. So their field marks, they have quite heavy streaking on their breasts. So again, that's another one of those little subtleties that once you learn to recognize can make it easier. So even though many sparrows are streaked, they're kind of the characteristic of the streaking differs. So it can be really heavy, it can be really delicate, it can be broken. And so those kind of little subtleties, as you start to notice them, become more obvious once you know what you're looking for. So again, they have pretty heavy streaking on their breast, and it centralizes usually into a spot. So you can kind of see on this top picture, there's these stripes, and then it looks like they are kind of all coming together right in the middle of its chest there. Their color is usually more of a a warm brown or cinnamon or rusty color. And again, they have this really pronounced mustache or malar stripe, that white stripe coming down from the bill. And we can find these guys in Colorado during the winter or even all year round. And you can look for them. They like to be near water a lot of times, and you can look up what their sounds like. Someone said it sounded like an old dial-up modem. That's a good way to remember it. And then you'll be able to identify our song sparrow. Next, I love this bird. They are so cool looking. They look like they're all dressed up for a fancy party, I think. So this is our Lincoln sparrow. So again, that streaking, you can see how different it is from the song sparrow. I'll flip back for a second. So this streaking is just kind of chunky, a little bit, all over the place. And then for the Lincoln sparrow, it's a little bit more delicate and a little bit more, even, I guess. So that streaking on the chest, and it actually doesn't go all the way down the belly. So it really just ends on the chest and breast area there. And then they also have this buffy kind of cream colored necklace. So their throat is kind of a white gray, and then it fades into this buffy and then goes into a clean white belly. And then they also, so you'll notice a lot of these sparrows have that mustache or malar stripe, but this one matches his buffy necklace. So this one is color coordinating nicely. And they're another sparrow that has a fairly small bill. They're also found in Colorado during migration and a bit during the breeding season too. So again, spring, summer, fall. And we do catch a few of these at our banding station at Bar Lake, and they are just so cool. All of those different patterns are really, really neat. Next, we have our white-crowned sparrow, which I bet a lot of you are familiar with. And even if you weren't sure what to call it, you've probably seen it. So the white-crowned sparrow, they have this really distinct black and white striped head. And a lot of times their head looks like it's peaked. So their crown looks a little pointy almost. They have a fairly small bill as well. And then the bird you see on the bottom is in the immature plumage. So before the bird becomes an adult and gets that really smart black and white striping, the stripes on their head are brown and gray. So these birds can be found in Colorado during the winter and year round. So these are what we call short distance or altitudinal or elevation migrators. So they spend their summers up in the mountains. So if you are able to get up in the mountains, you might see these birds this time of year up there, but then you might notice them coming to visit us down here in the foothills and on the plains during the winter, which is really cool. It's fun to get these little bursts of color during the winter months. Okay, next we have our white-throated sparrow, which you can probably guess why it got its name. It has that really clean white area below its beak on its throat. It also has a black and white striped head like our white-crowned sparrow, but again, the difference is that white throat, and it has a yellow lore as well. And these birds migrate through Colorado. The next one we have is a Lark Sparrow, and these birds are super cool. They're definitely one of the most distinct sparrows. So if you really want to boost your confidence, really learn first these distinctive sparrows like the Lark Sparrow and white-throated and white-crowned, and then you can move on to the others that just seem brown and streaky. The Lark Sparrows are just absolutely stunning. So they're pretty big for a sparrow. Like I said, they have this really distinctive head pattern. So there's just this mix of black and white stripes, and they have a chestnut kind of where their ear would be, and a little bit of yellow on the back of their head. They have a spot in the middle of their chest too. It's a bit difficult to see in this picture, but it's there, and they are found in Colorado during the breeding season as well. So another really distinctive sparrow that you might not have even realized was a sparrow is our state bird, the Lark Bunting. So again, this is a really distinctive sparrow, pretty big, and the males and the females do look different. So the top picture, we can see a male in breeding plumage, so just all black, and has a pretty significant white wing patch. And in the picture below, we can see some breeding males and then also some females. And during the non-breeding season, and if it's a juvenile, they tend to look similar to the females too. So the females, typical sparrow, they're kind of brown and streaky, but they still have that white wing patch. And then another really good characteristic to look for is their bill. So their bill is really, really thick, and it's kind of this blue-gray color. So if you see a bird that looks like a sparrow, so say we're seeing a female Lark Bunting, that white wing patch and the really thick, chunky bill, that's kind of a blue-gray color, those are going to be your tells, your field marks to knowing that it's a Lark Bunting. And these guys are much more common on the plains. So if you are traveling to eastern Colorado, you'll have a greater chance of seeing our wonderful state bird. Okay, excuse me. So our next learning celebration, are you guys ready? So again, if you know right away, just give a few minutes, or if you don't want it spoiled, just ignore the chat or hide your chat. Here we go. And again, these are all sparrows that we just talked about in this kind of second portion. And again, and I've seen a few questions, that's awesome. If you have any other questions, just feel free to type those in. And if I see them, I will try to answer them, or Miss Stacy in the background will answer them, or Kelsey. Nice, people are getting number 2, very good. I love that everyone is at least taking a stab at it, even if they're not 100% sure. But it seems like all of you are doing a great job. Super impressed. Okay, here we go. Number 1, it was the Lark Sparrow with that really, really distinctive head. So the black and white and kind of chestnut color, rusty color, and yellow Lark Sparrow. Number 2 was the Lark Bunting. I think everyone got that one. Very nice. Number 3 is the Lincoln Sparrow. So again, they just kind of look like they're ready to go to a fancy party. Lots of different colors and patterns, and that buffy kind of cream colored necklace and matching mustache or malar stripe. Number 4 is the white-crowned sparrow. So they have a white crown with some black streaks. Number 5 was the song sparrow. So again, the kind of heavily streaked chest with that central coming together in a central spot is their field mark, kind of main field mark. And then number 6 was the white-throated sparrow. So again, they have a similar head pattern to the white crowned, but they have that white throat and the yellow between their bill and eye. So I see someone said, I'm looking at several different field guides and many of these birds aren't listed. That's interesting. I'm not sure why that would be. It depends what field guide you're looking at. Most of these that we're talking about are fairly widespread across the US, but because we are in Colorado, they might skew a little bit more towards the west. So if you're looking at an Eastern US specific field guide, they might not be in there. So that could be one reason. But other than that, I'm not 100% sure why that would be, but we can dig into that a little more. Okay, we're going to give our brains a little bit of a break. We just saw 12 different sparrows, so let's let that sink in. We're going to change gears for just a little bit and learn about this really important study that Bird Conservancy was a part of that was published at the end of last year. And some of you might have heard about it. So there we go. So like I said, at the end of last year, this really kind of monumental study came out, and it was published by a whole group of scientists. So there were scientists from Cornell University, American Bird Association, Bird Conservancy, Canada Wildlife Service. I think there were 6 or 7 organizations all in all. And they wanted to know if there had actually been a net change in birds over the past 50 years. So basically, we've known for a long time we've been able to track trends. So we could see, oh, is the sparrow population trending down or trending up? Is the warbler population trending down or trending up? But some birds are trending down, some are trending up. We didn't know for sure, does that equal out, or are we actually losing a lot more birds? Are we gaining birds? We didn't know for sure. So these scientists decided to conduct this study to actually figure it out. And as you can see in the slide, or maybe you'd even heard about it before, they found that we've lost almost 3 billion birds since 1970. So in about 50 years, we've lost almost a net loss of 3 billion with a B birds. And just if you interpret that a little bit differently, we have about 30% fewer birds today than we did in 1970. And the scientists, they expected that. They expected that we would see a loss of birds, but this magnitude was pretty staggering to them. So then they decided to kind of break it down by biome or habitats, which habitats are faring better or worse. And if we look all the way to the right-hand side, you can see the grassland. So the grasslands habitat or biome was hit the hardest, or has been hit the hardest in the past 50 years or so. So grassland birds have declined by over half. And eastern forest birds, they aren't quite so bad, but they were down by 20%. There are some biomes that are doing better though, so this isn't all doom or gloom. Let's break it down by family. So look at that, the biggest piece of the pie, bringing it back around full circle, are our sparrow friends that we've just been talking about. And that makes sense because most sparrows are primarily grassland birds. They depend on that biome for their survival. So that makes sense that the hardest hit biome correlates to the hardest hit family of birds. So the red wheel that we see, those are the birds that have seen a net loss in their populations. But the blue circle are birds that have actually seen a net gain. So that's exciting. Like I said, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things that are working. So we know that conservation works, like for ducks and geese and raptors. We know there have been really intense conservation efforts for those families, and it works. So the question now is, well, how do we make those efforts work for sparrows and warblers and blackbirds and all of these other families? So Bird Conservancy is doing a lot of really amazing work to reverse these trends. And because grasslands and sparrows are the hardest hit, we focus a lot of our work in those areas. We primarily work in the grassland regions, and most of the grasslands are privately owned. So again, that's why we have our stewardship team. If we're going to increase the health of the grassland ecosystems, we need to work with those private landowners that own most of that land to make sure that it's healthy for birds and other wildlife and can still be productive for their business as well. So everybody wins. And we have really amazing partnerships with people down in Mexico in the Chihuahuan Desert as well. So we do a lot of environmental rehabilitation down there, because most of our sparrows, even though they might spend part of their time with us here in Colorado or in the US, they are wintering in Mexico. So if they don't have good habitat down there to hang out during the winter, then all of our work in Colorado or throughout the other parts of the US is kind of for naught. So that's why we really focus our efforts there. But the good news is there's also things that you can do. People, everyday people, even if you don't consider yourself a birder or know much about birds, there are still lots and lots of things that we can do to help out our birds. So out of this study, we created these 7 simple actions. So of course, if we were to only say the doom and gloom of all of this and make this whole laundry list of things that people need to do to save the birds, we know that most people are turned off by that, right? That's too much. We don't want to see things that are sad. So we made sure to highlight how conservation works and have some easy things that we can do. So we'll just kind of quickly go through this and get back to our sparrows and do another learning celebration. So we can make our windows safe. Many, many birds are killed each year by flying into windows, and it's not just, you know, the skyscrapers and things in cities. A lot of it is just residential buildings and houses. So we can put stickers and decals on our windows. There's you can pull your blinds, lots of different things, because what birds are seeing as they're flying is just the reflection in your window. So they just see trees and sky and think that they can keep on flying and don't realize that there's a solid surface there until it's too late. So anything you can do to break up the reflection of your window will help birds avoid that. We want to make sure we're keeping our cats indoors, or you can build a really cool thing called a catio. One of our campers, we were so excited, they built their cats a catio. So basically it's an outdoor enclosed space, so your cats can still go outside and enjoy, lay in the sunshine like they love to do, but they can't prowl around and predate birds. Cats are actually one of the biggest killers of birds. They kill, I think, around 2 billion birds a year. So it's a bigger deal than some people might realize. We also want to have less lawn. We want to plant native plants. So planting native plants provides food and habitat and things that birds really need and are, you know, healthiest for them to survive. And also by planting natives, you require less pesticides and herbicides. You have to, you know, if you plant more plants instead of having just lawn grass, you don't have to mow as much, and who doesn't want that? So again, avoiding pesticides. We want to drink bird-friendly coffee if we can. So most coffee, well, all of our coffee really comes from tropical regions where coffee plants grow really well. But that's also where a lot of birds are spending their winters. So coffee plantations are usually in rainforest habitat, but the rainforest is clear cut so that the coffee plants get all of that direct sunshine. So bird-friendly coffee, there is a specific certification from Smithsonian that you can look for, but basically it is shade grown, so the rainforest canopy is kept intact, so there's still nice habitat for those migrating birds or the neotropical residents. And it's organic, so they're not using pesticides and things like that. We can also use less plastic, so making sure that we're using our reusable grocery bags, reusable straws, things like that. And then also you can watch birds and share what you see. So you can use eBird is a really cool app. So even if you're just sitting on your front porch and you notice some birds, you can submit an eBird checklist, and that information goes to researchers at Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And the really cool thing is the study I was talking about, most of that data that they gathered from 1970 onward was not from eBird because it hasn't been around long enough, but it was from citizen science data. So people who are participating in things like Christmas bird count, that was instrumental to the study. So even though you might just be sitting on your porch enjoying a cup of coffee, you are really contributing to the advancement of science and saving birds, which is really, really cool. Let's see, what coffee brands are certified shade grown? So the Smithsonian label, it's a gold label. I don't believe, at least right now, is not widely available in common stores. If you go to like your Wild Birds Unlimited, I think they carry those. And yeah, thank you, Tyler. Birds and Beans coffee, you can order that online. Also, if you are in a pinch and you are, say, just at King Super, if you look for Rainforest Alliance certified, so that's the one that has the little green frog on it, that is at least a step in the right direction, because generally those are shade grown. The restrictions aren't quite as much as the bird friendly coffee, but it still is a step in the right direction. Okay, here we go. So now that our brains have settled, hopefully we've had some time to process all of those beautiful sparrows we learned about, we have our final learning celebration. So there's going to be 8 instead of 6, and they will be a mix of all of the species of sparrows we've talked about today. So again, give folks a chance. Don't type your answers in right away, or just go ahead and hide that chat box. And here we go. And just remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, all these birds really kind of look the same, just take them one by one and see what stands out to you the most, and just then kind of start to narrow it down. Okay, I see some answers coming in. Very nice. Good. And again, even if you have no idea, just take your best guess. We're all in this together. Okay, so here, oh, I think I advanced my slide a little too quickly. Maybe the answers were up there. So the answer, so number 1 is the chipping sparrow. So again, that rufous crown and black eyeline versus our American tree sparrow with the same rufous crown, but a matching eyeline and that bicolored bill. Number 3 is our Savannah Sparrow. So pretty streaky, like pretty noticeable streaks and that yellow lore or area between the eye. Versus the Whitethroated Sparrow. So both of these have yellow lores, but you can see the other field marks are very different. So of course the Whitethroated has that clean white throat and pretty distinct black and white striping on the head. Number 5 is our Vesper Sparrow, so that white eye ring and malar stripe. Number 6 is our Brewer Sparrow. So again, kind of a little drab bird, but the kind of dusky mustache stripe. Our Song Sparrow, you can see that's really more of a warm brown color than, say, the Brewer Sparrow. And the heavy streaking that comes to a central spot on the chest. And then number 8 is our fancy little Lincoln Sparrow with that more delicate striping or streaking on the chest and the buffy little necklace and matching mustache. Very nice job, everyone. I am super impressed. Okay, so those are all of the sparrows I have for you today. I wanted to make it challenging enough that we were able to learn, but not too challenging that you were just overwhelmed and think, oh, well, I guess sparrows are a bird family I'll never learn. So hopefully we hit the sweet spot for most of you. So at this time, I want to open it up to questions. So go ahead and type in the chat box whatever questions you might have. And Stacy, was there anything that we didn't get to that had already come up?
Hey, Sarah, this is Tyler. Stacy's computer is doing something funky.
Oh, no.
But you have been doing a great job getting to most of those questions. So
cool.
Until some new ones come in, I think we're pretty good for now.
Cool. Oh yeah, and I see a lot of people asking about audio clips. Yeah, that is something that we want to try to do in the future. All of this virtual programming was very new to us, so we wanted to keep it pretty low stakes at first, but we have had a lot of requests for that, so hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future. Okay, I see some more questions coming in, I think.
The noticeable difference between finches and sparrows is a question that's actually come up a couple times, which is a great question.
Oh,
So
that is a great question. So sparrows and finches. So a lot of time finches are going to have a lot more coloration on them. So if you think about something like a goldfinch, really bright yellow and black if it's a male. If you think about something like a house finch, at least a male house finch has that red wash on it. The female is a little different, just that is, again, one of our streaky brown birds. But the bill shape is going to be very similar, right? They're both seed eaters, so that conical shaped beak. But I would say finches generally have more coloration. Tyler, is there anything else that you would add?
yeah, that's a great answer. Just the color and the shape too. I also feel like especially house finches in general, are like more slender, and sparrows can be a little more like plump looking.
Yeah, definitely.
Here's another question. Back to the old world sparrows and house sparrows. Are house sparrows considered invasive species? This is specifically for New Jersey, but I feel like we can address that for a lot of places.
Yeah. Yes. So if a house sparrow is anywhere in North America or basically outside of Europe, it is considered invasive or introduced. And the reason for that, so technically there could be a difference between introduced and invasive. So introduced just means it's non-native, so it's not really where it's supposed to be. Whereas invasive could be considered more of a nuisance species. And generally house sparrows are considered invasive because they're pretty hardy little birds, and they are generalists, and they're fairly aggressive. So they can outcompete most of the native species in an area. And that means if they're out competing, they can take over nest boxes or nesting habitats. They'll even throw out the eggs of some other birds. And so they can contribute to the decline of native species and the increase of these invasive species.
Awesome. There's a couple more questions. What about where do Lark Buntings live? Someone's lived here in Colorado for 30 years and she's not seen one yet.
Yeah, I've never seen one either, to be honest. But yeah. They're really on the eastern plains. They're very grassland obligate bird. I don't know if you have any Lark Bunting hotspots that you know of, Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, if you go east of Denver and drive on county roads in the summertime, you'll eventually find them. They're out there. They're just kind of far out there on those county roads. I saw some a couple weeks ago in the grasslands in Wyoming. So.
Oh yeah, Pawnee grasslands.
Yeah,
someone
Pawnee.
said. Perfect.
Oops. And it looks like that's most of the questions we've had. So sizing of sparrows. I know it's really hard to do that in these webinars, but yeah, you want to talk a little bit about the size of sparrows?
Sure. Yeah, so they do vary in size, and that's another one that, again, is really hard to do on your computer, and really getting, when it's safe, or if you feel safe to go out and birding, that's when it's really going to start to click, is when you see a chipping sparrow and see a different kind of sparrow and see them side by side. So there are, kind of small, medium, and large sparrows. So yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. It looks like, I talked a little bit about Thayer's in the chat window. So I'll just bring that up real quickly. The Thayer software, I'll add a link to the thank you email I'll send out later this afternoon. It's a free software. If you go on just ThayersBirdingSoftware.com, he's offering it for free for everyone. And you can use it. You need a computer because it is kind of a big software, but you can compare species from all around the world, North America, and that really helps you get into bird songs. Like I use it a lot for helping myself with bird songs. With these webinars, it is really hard to add songs in. And we kind of want to leave you all with a little bit of curiosity. So even if we don't have videos and bird songs, hopefully you can get out there and hear them for yourself, and then keep in touch with us.
Cool. Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, I definitely second Thayer's. It's amazing. You can create your own quizzes and all sorts of really, really cool stuff.